This is Hook Theory, Episode 1, Killing the Goat and the Four-Quadrant Theory of Music Criticism. At the end of every year, Lake Superior State University releases a list of words and phrases to be banished from the culture going forward. Among these are tongue-in-cheek words like amazing that have been misused, misunderstood, and applied way too casually to normal circumstances. My personal favorite is, it is what it is, especially since so many other cultures have their own paraphrases and concepts of it, but it's the English one that we take umbrage with. And sitting appropriately at number 1, right at the top of that, the phrase GOAT. Now, if you don't know this phrase, and if you by some chance happen to not be a Tom Brady fan, and how many of those are around, GOAT means greatest of all time. I have had issues with this phrase for years now, and I've been saying it only to myself in my inner circle, but I'm finally glad that somebody put it out there in the spotlight to be the meaningless phrase I've always thought it is. First of all, especially in mass media, the phrase is applied way too soon. New properties get declared this far too easily. Whether they're movies or albums or artists, it's far too easy to have a successful single or a successful album or to have a successful tour and to be instantly declared the greatest of something. And also, the phrase is impossible to mean anything, particularly the point of all time, especially when you pair a phrase in there, greatest blank of all time. To say something is the greatest of all time is to basically claim that this thing is going to stand up against things that don't actually exist yet. Nobody can know that. So thank you everybody who voted on that. And it's nice to know that I'm not alone in how I've been feeling about this terrible phrase. Which brings me to a theory that I've been developing for a while about how music is criticized and how media in general is by journalists, who are usually the last people qualified to discuss the quality of a piece of art. But that's a topic for a whole other video that will come along later. If you look at the first few paragraphs that summarize any sort of album or movie or book or anything on a Wikipedia page, you'll usually see that they concatenate things into simple phrases using the term greatest blank of all time. And in my experience, it's usually done with 4 distinct concepts that fit into a quadrant system that anybody else criticizing it tends to use as proof, and will use 1 or 2 of these terms to justify the moniker of greatest blank of all time. So here is my 4-quadrant theory of music criticism. The 4 terms are successful, popular, influential, and good or best. The first can be grouped into what you'd call the esteem category, and the other 2 you'd call the quality. So when you read what people write about these, or how they review them, they usually use 1 or 2 of these terms interchangeably. And clearly what you can see from these 4 points is that taken as they are, they mean completely different things, especially since some of them can be quantified and others are harder to do so. Successful and popular, sure, we can get metrics for that. Spotify, radio airplay, concert attendance, things that can pretty much signal when a culture is really in tune with a piece of work. Influential and its actual overall quality, whether it's good or not, isn't usually left to the people who are qualified to do so. The musicians, the musicologists, people who would actually be able to give you definitive musical interpretations. But again, that's hard to quantify and ultimately comes down to being subjective. So if we apply the 4-quadrant theory to albums, you'll discover, as I did, it's actually really hard to find something that hits all 4 of these. And if something hits all 4 of these, can that be the new metric to determine if it is one of the greatest albums of all time? Would AC/DC's Back in Black be considered on par with Radiohead's OK Computer? And would this quadrant system actually give evidence of that? Does OK Computer belong on the same level as Beefheart's Trout Mask Replica, something that can be said to be incredibly influential, much like OK Computer, but not nearly as successful or popular? Again, this is my opinion. I love Trout Mask Replica. I'm not that big a fan of Radiohead. That's a topic for another time. The only album off the top of my head I could think of that hit all of these, Thriller. Some might say the Beatles. Some might say Bob Dylan. I don't know. I would let you fill that out because, again, quality and popularity, these are all subjective, but it's an interesting way to look at it, and it's something that I have found cuts through all the bias and the fat that journalists love to use when reviewing media. And don't worry, I'm not excluding myself from this. Even my 5 favorite albums, none of them hit all 4 of these quadrants. What are your favorite albums? What are your favorite artists? And do they fall in this quadrant system? And what do you think of this as the new possible metric to determine what is the greatest, if that can even be determined? So what's the hook theory takeaway from this episode? What I would hope for is that you can educate yourself to be able to tell a difference between something you're enjoying and something actual quality. They can be the same thing, sometimes they're not. I have plenty of things that I love that are not quality, and plenty of things that I can say are quality, but I cannot listen to them. There's a British band called Everything Everything that I think are actually pretty fantastic. The problem is, their lead singer is so annoying, and you will know the exact moment that you will love them or hate them. I highly recommend checking them out and coming up to your own conclusion. I can clearly see that that's quality, but I can't listen to it because I don't enjoy it. Does that matter? Not really. I would encourage you to do also what I do a lot, which is go back to things that I didn't like the first time around and try to expose yourself to them. Maybe you were in a different frame of mind at the time. Maybe you just weren't mature enough to understand something. Maybe something has happened to you in life that you suddenly connect with it. But who knows? So learn to pay attention to what you're feeling and what you're thinking as you're experiencing something. Maybe you'll learn something about yourself and the media you consume. So that's all from me. This has been episode 1 of Hook Theory. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.